You are listening to Beyond the Verse, a Star Citizen podcast. A show dedicated to Cloud Imperium games, Star Citizen, and Squadron 42. Whether you fight, explore, unite, and/or trade, we bring you news, updates, interviews, reviews, and analysis. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a pour of Radegast, and join us as we go Beyond the Verse.
Launch sequence activated.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Beyond the Verse Star Citizen podcast. I'm your host, Sulyce, and welcome to week 28, episode 65. This one's going to be a doozy. We're covering 2 weeks worth of news, reviews, analysis, because last week we took off for Independence Day. So we've got all of week 27 and all of week 28 to go through quickly, and I'm going to try to be fast here. We've got Jumptown to cover. We have the subscriber flare, the July subscriber promotions to go through. We've got the Star Citizen monthly report. We have the Inside Star Citizen server meshing, the dev diary. We're not going to watch that one together. I'm just going to recap it, maybe some highlights that I got from it, and then we will get into this week in Star Citizen. So we'll cover the latest patch notes that are in the Evocati with 3.24, the roadmap update, this Inside Star Citizen, which has to do with cargo missions and the blockade runner, and then we will end as normal with a little bit of lore. We'll get into the Whitley's guide about the Aegis Vulcan. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And the name for this episode is Foundation Festival. So I'm taking a huge risk and hoping that later this morning we will be getting the drop. We have confirmed that the Foundation Festival will start today. It's going to start this Friday. Just don't know if it's going to be that regular 10 a.m. U.S. Central that we're expecting, that we are used to seeing from Star Citizen drops. So crossing my fingers as a content creator that this doesn't backfire. Worst case scenario, I'll pause, I'll record it when it does drop, and I'll just merge the two. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Well, I hope this finds everybody well. Again, 2 weeks from being away from each other. I'll get y'all up to date. So for the Independence Day, I barbecued for like 10 to 15 individuals, rented a bounce house, put in the backyard, and it was a phenomenal day. That was Thursday. And then Friday and Saturday, my family went to the Kalahari Resort. It's our go-to kind of staycation, if you will. It's like literally 5 miles from my house, so super convenient, still very, very expensive, but had a great time and just a proud fatherly moment. I love talking about my kids if this is your first time listening to the podcast, but my son, 8 years old, has a tendency to be too scared to try anything and shuts down, right? He's ridden a few of the big slides, so I was like really pushing it this time, like, hey, I'll go down with you, and we'll make it a thing, and then if you do really well, we'll do extra arcades the next day. He ended up doing all the slides. I'm so proud. There were some slides that he just didn't want to start, but then overcame that, and then there were some slides that he started, but like his third or fourth time he was like, nope, too scary, not gonna do it. And he overcame that. So just, again, very proud moment for those of you who are other, parents listening to this podcast or watching this podcast. I'm sure you can relate. So a lot of fun. And then, okay, so many of you know I'm a product manager for Amazon, specifically Amazon Business. And next week is Prime Day. So I have also been extremely busy work-wise, getting everything ready for the promotions and everything else going down next week. So this has just been chaos since last week. So I absolutely needed to take off. I hope you all forgive me. we'll talk more about Prime Day, and we'll talk more about that later. Kind of along the same lines, and I'll transition this into actual gaming conversation. Along the same lines, I think I might have told y'all that I ended up getting 2 more sticks of memory, of RAM for my PC. So I'm full kitted at 64 gigabytes. It's awesome. Saw a little bit of improvement when playing Star Citizen, but my 4070 Super came in. Now, it's not the top of the line Ti or whatever nonsense. The 4090 Ti, I think, is the top of the line. It's nothing like that. And I know next year the 50 series is coming out, but it is night and day. Going from a 2080 to a 4070 Super, I mean, it is incredible. Did y'all know that there are volumetric clouds in Star Citizen? I'd say that tongue in cheek, but with my 2080, I had to turn all that crap off. I turned it off. I wasn't even using the image upscaling. Wasn't even doing any of that. And now I've got everything firing on all cylinders, and it is a phenomenal experience. So blessed there. For those of you, again, listening, are part of Soul Provision. It's been quite the journey. So anyways, so there you go. Caught you up on my personal life. It was only 1 week that we missed out on. Let's get into this podcast. Again, my God, there's so much to cover. Okay, so first and foremost, again, the first podcast of each month, we recap our performance from the month prior. So sharing my screen for those of you on YouTube, this was the June monthly show review. And again, this is more about you than it is about me. I provide the vessel. Y'all are the ones actually carrying it. So here we go. In 64 episodes, in 15 bonus Org Night episodes, we have reached 67 countries, listening in 29.4 thousand plays and watching 37.9 thousand hours. And then I've started to include our Soul Provision in-game organization numbers. We grew to 146 Discord members and 78 Spectrum members. So for the infographic, you can see here, let me click on this, make it pretty and big. It's great. I mean, we've grown so much, and we are about a year and a half, year and 3 months. We're like a year and a quarter. We're like a year and a quarter worth of being live, recording podcasts, and our numbers are great. And I want to thank everybody, Conif Jorn, the Astropub, Blasphemous, Authentic Young, Star Jump, Galactica, Space Tomato, for being special guests on the show, and of course all you listeners who contribute on a weekly and monthly basis. This is, again, more about you. Just wanted to celebrate, as I do every single month whenever we have this time. All right, to the community, or from the community. Here we go.
Incoming message.
All right, so I asked kind of a selfish question. Again, every single podcast, I ask a poll and a Q&A over on Spotify. And my poll for last episode, again, was a little selfish. I wanted to know about the podcast specifically, and if the ads at the beginning of the podcast apply to your specific interests. So it used to be host read ads where I was able to voice over something, add my own little twist to it, or maybe make it pertinent to you, throw a Star Citizen twist in it. And they got rid of host read ads. And so I think I went on one of the podcasts saying that I'm not going to subject y'all to these automated ads. However, the replacement for that promised that we could tailor those ads, make it more applicable to the spirit of what we do, of what we provide, or the podcast's theme. So I wanted to just, again, ask, does it pertain to your specific interests? So sharing my screen, I had 18 votes. That's 18, not 80. 18 votes. So thank you all for contributing, and it overwhelmingly said that they don't apply to your specific interests, but you don't mind them. So they don't pertain, but you don't mind. It's 30 seconds, hopefully, over and done. So 72.2% say no, but don't mind. Then we had 16.7%, that's 3 votes, that said no, and they do bother the listener. And then we had 2 saying yes. So 11.1% saying yes, they do apply to their specific interests. So here's my promise to you. Here's kind of like my next steps. I'm going to go into those tailored ads. I'm going to make it even more tailored. I'm going to remove, I already removed everything basically social, everything political. I'm going to go ahead and remove all the other stuff, right? Most of it. I'm going to leave up leisure and gaming and some other categories. But I'm going to keep it going because it is helping keep the lights on. It is helping fund a lot of let's see here, the necessities to have a good product for you. There's some ongoing software that I keep up to date with. And obviously I'm saving up to replace the Go XLR. So this is all important, right? So thank you so much for the feedback. I will adjust. I will always adjust when I get feedback. So there you go. Again, thank you so much. Let's go over to the comments. So I asked the question. Ooh. Where is the question? I'm going to refresh the screen, and then if it doesn't work, I'm going to show y'all what I'm looking at. So yeah, let me show you my screen real quick. So the question's not here, but I'm pretty damn sure I asked if we were going to start doing lore specials at the end of the podcast, like lore deep dives. What would you want those to be? And there's gotta be a better view for this. And I'm starting to think there's not, because there's episodes and comments. Let's just make this work. All right. So we had eight responses to that question about lore deep dives. Let's just go through all of it. So we have Groza number 1, quote, I love learning about the history of the ship manufacturers, specifically the major players and all of the drama. All lore is good lore. Thanks. In response to Q&A, is there... Okay, so that's weird. Every single response has in response to Q&A, is there a lore subject you would like to see us deep dive? The user interface has definitely changed since the last time we did this. So, okay. Ship manufacturers and the drama that plays into it. Like, we know the Drake drama. We know that they're the redheaded stepchildren and they've been kind of ostracized. That's why Invictus launch week, you've got all the ships that are featured in ILW, but then you've got DefenseCon that features Drake. Like, there's plenty of drama to go around. And you're going to see this theme through the other 7 comments, that ship lore is like what everybody wants to read or wants to hear about. So Dakota Riley says, I also want to learn more about the ship manufacturer histories like Groza. We've got Admiral Zeke. I also would like some more in-depth lore on ships. I've been curious about the Misk brand themselves, not including Merle, of course. I think he meant Mirai, but Mural, I'm interested about the Mural piece. But Misk specifically, yeah, they're very, very interesting manufacturer. We have Disowned saying any subject. I love listening to any lore I can get my hands on. Awesome. Real quick on that piece, I've always been very hesitant leaning into most of the lore. I did the time capsules at the beginning, like episodes 1 through 20, the first group of our podcasts. So I did the time capsules because those are staple, right? Those probably will not change. At least a lot of the major details will not change. Again, major events that have moved us from 2024 all the way to 2954. The ship manufacturers, I think those are pretty set in stone, but all the other stuff, I'm a little hesitant getting into maybe some of the superfluous lore stories because of the potential of it changing. I think the Astropub, Paul over there, I think thinks the same, or I've heard him say something along those lines, but like the game isn't officially out yet. That's no surprise to anybody, but we're a little bit cautious about going into some of these brand new posts and if they're going to be consistent or not. So I'm weighing whether or not to dive into like other species and other aliens and maybe some of these smaller events that are outside of the time capsule. So there you go. Wanted to respond to that piece. So we have Call Me Teach, quote, Due to the most recent update to how Respawn works in-game currently, I think it's time to go back to the section of lore that talks about Respawn and the dreaded death of a spaceman. Super interesting. I have not covered death of a spaceman at all in the tenure of this podcast, but it basically puts a story behind your ability to respawn, right? And I'm not going to ruin anything yet. It does deserve its own deep dive, and maybe that's actually the first one that I do, because the ship manufacturer runs will take some time. Death of a Spaceman is pretty straightforward, so I'm very much considering that as the next. Dreamer of Days. What about the published short fiction like Cassandra's Tears, Tales of Kid Crimson, etc.? Also, Steelworker Beast, part of our organization, told him that he had to finish a Xenothreat in 322 to qualify for the armor. That's why he didn't get it. Okay. So a couple of episodes ago, during this session or the segment of the podcast, Dreamer of Days mentioned that he finished all of it in 323, finished the Xenothreat raids, but didn't get his armor. And this is why, because he didn't finish the beginning overdrive pieces in 322. It's very unfortunate. It's very, very unfortunate. But yeah, one of the requirements is you had to have done, I think, overdrive missions 1 through 4. I think it was 1 through 4 you had to accomplish by 323. And when 323 came out, Phase 5, or the Xenothreat raid, was available. It's something along those lines, one of those combinations. All right, ISORET. ISORET, if I mispronounced that, please correct me. ISORET, quote, ship and vehicle manufacturers or the companies that own the current planets would be interesting. So yeah, the companies owning the planets, that is very interesting. And if you're a first-time listener, or maybe you're not as familiar with Star Citizen, it's, Crusader Industries owns Crusader. Hurston Dynamics owns Hurston. This is kind of like obvious, but you've got, I think, Covalex owns ArcCorp, or ArcCorp is the company and Covalex is the business side of things. Again, very much needed to have a deep dive, but it is super interesting that these major corporations came out of Terra, or the Earth system, purchased these planets. Like, that's crazy. It'd be like Amazon buying a planet and Tesla buying a planet to a new system. Like, that's just crazy to think about. But that is exactly what happened in Stanton. So I think that also is worth its own deep dive as well. Then we have Anna. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong. Anna/Anna. Is it a soft A or hard A? But the lore of Microtech, or maybe why ships would in lore exist before they exist in game. Also, you ask, so I answer. I'm in other people's ships, prime entity. P.S. I recommend you to a friend. Thank you so much. I think this is a good moment. Thank you so much. I have always set out to grow organically. I think only a few times I have paid promotion. So like when I do my monthly show reviews on Twitter, I'll do like a paid promotion just so it gets out there and it gets marketed, whatever. But for the most part, I love the organic growth. I don't necessarily pursue these manufactured audiences. So word of mouth is my number one growth driver. So thank you so much for doing that, even if you invite 1 or 2 friends. We also had a few join Soul Provision for last night's org night. That was friends through friends, and we had a great time doing the Vaughn missions, which we can get to here in a second when we go through Jumptown. So but yeah, so thank you so much. But the ships that exist in lore before they exist in the game, I would actually not argue, because we're not debating anything, but I would actually share that like all the games that are in lore exist in the development. So they're being developed, whether they're in white box phase, gray box phase, outside of like the Retribution, outside of these massive ones that CIG come out and said we will not produce and put in game, flyable for the players anyways. Most that I'm familiar with, most if not all the ships mentioned are being developed at this current time. There's a couple discrepancies, like with the alien ships. There's made mention of certain holes or certain designs that I haven't read anything about development, so maybe that is the outlier. But yeah, I think it goes like development, and as they're being developed, the lore team will write a narrative about it, or at least include it into the narrative, and then we will see it kind of socialized when it gets into the white box phase and gray box and black box. So my first little crack at answering that question. And that's it. That's it for episode 64. And again, thank you so much. I'm still kind of thinking through what this episode's Q&A and poll will be. More than likely, it's going to be based around cargo and blockade runner, because that is kind of the high mark of the Inside Star Citizen. Okay, let's get into 2 weeks ago. So this kind of ties into the beginning of 2 weeks ago, but it's also one of the polls that I asked on Twitter, and it got some pretty good engagement. So about 3.5 thousand views, almost 300 votes. But my question was the favorite gaming chair. So Monster Tech and Star Citizen partnered up and created ship manufacturer gaming chairs. So imagine like the chair that you see behind me, a Secret Lab. Imagine a gaming chair, but the stitching and the design is like RSI. I think the other two, I have them pulled up here. Yep, yes, you have an RSI, you got the Aegis and the Mirai. Good looking ships. I mean, I think that might be actually Anvil. I don't know why, for some reason, I'm having Anvil. There you go. So that's the Anvil, not Aegis. That's the Anvil. So RSI, Anvil, and Mirai. So they created those ships. Well, let me just show you. I'm already on the article. They created these chairs, and they look good. They look comfortable. They look like they are designed to have like sticks and throttles and things attached to it. You can see the gap between the legs. I mean, it looks like a good build. I have never sat in or even have seen Monster Tech chairs, but this was a conversation that started, and on Twitter, outside of the poll, I even contributed to basically my thoughts on gaming chairs. For the most part, gaming chairs are very uncomfortable. I have only found one comfortable, and it's the one I'm in now, the Secret Labs. And so my question for everybody was, your favorite gaming chair. So of the main brands, and what I consider main, I went on to IGN.com, went to their 2024 top gaming chairs, and chose the 4 brands that were mentioned. Well, the 3 brands that were mentioned plus Monster Tech. And so Monster Tech, Secret Lab, and a seat. Onda and a seat. Never even heard of them before. And then other, comment below. So this was pretty telling. Again, almost 300 votes. We had 46.5% say Secret Lab. They agree with me. Secret Lab is super awesome and comfortable. I recommend Secret Lab. So good. Right behind that is 38.7% for other, comment below. And then we have 12.8% Monster Tech, and then 2% voted for the Anda seat or Onda seat. And again, why does this matter? Just knowing that Monster Tech partnered up with CIG, created this gaming chair. It's really awesome. You can see the t-shirt I'm wearing. I love the physical. Like, it's one thing to own a lot of ships and have them in your hangar. It's great. But I love having the physical items, whether it's, again, gaming chair, maybe a neon sign behind me. Like, imagine a Whammers, right? Like the burger joint, having a Whammers neon light installed behind me, hanging on the wall. I think that'd be really cool. But these physical items is where it's at for me. So I love the direction that CIG is going or taking. So just wanted to propose that, or wanted to offer that. There's nothing really else on the gaming chair, nothing that really stood out. I wish them the best of luck. I don't know how it's going to compete with like a Secret Labs or some of these other, basic office chairs. Don't necessarily know how that works. But again, I wish them success. All right, so this week in Star Citizen, and that's 2 weeks ago, so July 1st, I'm not going to go crazy and go through like deliberately, or I'm not going to go deep into week 26 or week 27. I am sure this is old news at this time, so we're going to go very quickly through everything. So the bullet points for last week: you had the CIG flight chairs. We already talked about that. Jumptown 2.1 started on Tuesday. You had the subscriber promotions also on Tuesday. You had the Star Citizen monthly report on CommsLink, the Squadron 42 monthly report on email. Thursday's Inside Star Citizen was about server meshing, and then Friday's Star Citizen Live was the game dev making missions. This was about cargo. So again, we will quickly go through this all. Jumptown. So Jumptown again launched on Tuesday. It's one of my favorite events. Well, there's not a lot of events to choose from, just real talk. It's not like we have 10, 20 events. I mean, this is just a recurring event that happens, once, I would probably say once a quarter or once each, half of the year. And it's a lot of fun if you have an organization. And again, this is not a plug for Soul Provision. I think we're a phenomenal org, and I welcome you to join us. There's seats at the table. But doing Jumptown by yourself can be very off-putting. And I remember before Soul Provision grew, I had a hard time by myself getting into an Eclipse because it was stealthy, but getting into an Eclipse, getting into a fighter, and making any sort of success happen in Jumptown. You'd have to go in the general chat, and then you basically broadcasted that you were going to Jumptown, so people would go and make it very difficult for you. But in an org, it's one of the most fun events to kind of plan, strategize, coordinate for. And you've heard a couple of our Org Night podcasts, bonus episodes. You can actually go back and listen to them if you would like, but the preparation, the execution, they're all phenomenal experiences. Well, again, because last week was all canceled because of Independence Day, we didn't even have Org Night Thursday night because that actually was Independence Day. So that was July 4th. We did Jumptown on Monday, like this Monday, a couple days ago. And it was very fun. We were not successful at all. I don't think we sold a single box of drugs. Widow, by the way, is the specific drug. But we got there, and it was basically 2 hours of PvP. It was 2 hours of, I would say shit talking, but it was good. It was all in good spirit. We were getting on, and this is how Soul Provision conducts ourselves. We get on global chat, and we tease like, oh, you shouldn't be coming to, you should be coming to Jumptown when Soul Provision's here. Like, we're talking crap, but it's also out of good fun, and we made some friends, right? We created an environment where it was just force on force, and there was 6 of us, maybe 2 or 3 of them. They ended up partnering up. I don't know if they were in org or not, but it was awesome. It was a fun exchange around this area. Like Jumptown's origination or its inception, it pulls or it creates a PvP environment because it forces the server into one location. Now, how it plays out, whether or not you quote unquote play by the rules and you're getting the drugs or defending against the drugs, or you're pirating or whatever, I mean, there's no like CommsLink or crime stat. This is your free for all, and it was a lot of fun. 2 hours later, we didn't get any Widow, we didn't make any money, but it was a good time of the 6 of us that were able to join together against the 3 of them. No, I'm going to leave it there. I was going to get into a little bit of the drama, but it's Jumptown. Don't go to Jumptown. Don't go anywhere near Jumptown if you don't want a PvP. Just don't do it. General chat becomes toxic. When Jumptown is live, general chat becomes something. There's a difference between like talking crap and like fun, playful engagement from player to player. But then there's another version of that's just toxic. It's toxic, it becomes personal, it's too much. So I personally have general chat open. I usually have it closed, but I have it open during Jump Town because it's intel. It's a form of intel where I can see the chatter and I can make calls for the org whenever it's necessary. But man, it is a toxic time to be reading Keyboard Warriors. So anyways, Jump Town, I think at this point is over. I think it ended yesterday on Thursday. I could be wrong, but we didn't do it last night because it had already ended. I don't know if it was on Thursday or if it was on Wednesday. So there you go. Again, phenomenal experience. Nothing new. Nothing new that I'm tracking. No new features. I'm pretty sure there weren't any new locations. This is still Jump Town 2.1. So you've heard us brief it. You've heard us talk about it on this podcast. Subscriber promotions. Let's go. Like I said, I wouldn't go deep into these, but I feel like that's just going to happen naturally. July subscriber promotions. I am very, very happy with the paint schemes. Could care less about a knife, yet another knife. Could care less. But the paint schemes for the Corsair and the Vulture are spot on. Sharing my screen for those of you on YouTube, you can see the Corsair in the background. This silly looking knife right here is, the other item. But let's just go quickly through the awards or rewards. All right, quickly. Defend yourself with a Sunspike combat knife, specifically designed to keep you safe in lawless systems or the more dangerous parts of Stanton. Decorate your Drake Vulture or Corsair with a Dying Star livery before you make the jump to Pyro later this year. Earnable in game. This is where they go in and say most of these subscriber items can be found in the game. And now let's go through the items. Here's your combat knife. I don't know. We just have a lot of knives. I feel like we have many months worth of knives that we can use. It's fine. I'm not complaining. It looks good. It's got the serrated edge. It looks like it's rusted. It maybe has some permanent sand marking. Very pyro. I can see this like playing into that aesthetic. But all the Centurion subscribers get this knife. It's awesome. Whatever. Looks good. I don't know. I feel like we're just rehashing kind of the same items. So here is the Corsair Dying Star paint. I love this. I love this. It's got Joe written on the side. Don't know who the hell Joe is, but we got Joe written on the side. But the graffiti, the gang tagging on the Corsair looks amazing. I did a quick little video, like a 10-second walk around, and that video on Twitter is doing phenomenal. Now that I'm realizing this, like as I'm recording, I didn't put that on TikTok, and that probably would have done really well on TikTok. But anyways, so the Corsair paint job looks amazing. It's kind of what I'm flying with at this current moment when I do fly with the Corsair. It doesn't change, and I think I'm going to start calling this out, but some liveries change the cockpit, like the glass color. I'm thinking the Red Alert paint, like on the Carrack and the MSR, will change the front glass to be red. This doesn't do that. It doesn't make the glass tan. It doesn't change the color. It just makes the rest of the Corsair covered in graffiti. So that, again, is for the Imperator level subscribers. So we all get that if you're an Imperator. And the same paint scheme for the Drake Vulture is there as well. Now, I have not done any salvaging since this came out, so I haven't seen it physically on the Drake Vulture, but pictured in this image still looks good. It has very similar tagging on the different arms, the two arms of the Vulture. I see some pinks, I see some light blues, but overall kind of the same general aesthetic. And the Vulture paint is available in the Pledge store, I think for $10, $9. It's available in the Pledge store for $9. And so my reaction, like the paint was spot on. The paint was freaking amazing. I can't wait for them to do more with paint. My question is, what is the vision and the intent for paints in the game in Star Citizen 1.0? if we're doing solid colors, or maybe even like a primary color and an alternate color, I think you kind of have to do that. Most games offer that. Then a lot of the paint schemes are kind of worthless, right? But the actual, I think it's all art, but the actual like artistic paint schemes or the liveries like this one, the graffiti tagging, this is going to be something you're going to want in your hangar. You're not going to be able to draw on your ship. At least I've never heard it. I haven't seen it in any patch notes or dev notes. So you're going to want this. I think that's $9 very well spent. Put that vulture paint in your hangar and just let it sit, right? It's not going to break the bank. It's $9. So, alrighty. I usually go deeper into my feelings and thoughts there, but we're not even on this week yet. So wrapping this up, we do have a Star Citizen monthly report. Look, very transparent with you. Nothing was groundbreaking or earth-shattering in this update. And that's not like alarming. That should not concern any of the listeners. We're kind of in a good place right now. We're getting ready for 324 to drop. We'll cover the patch notes and the Evocati here in a couple of seconds. But 324 is right around the corner. Pyro is right after that. 24 will be the last patch before Pyro. And so after Pyro, most of the dev notes are taking us through to Pyro. So there are some ship information, so like the RSI Polaris, the RSI Zeus Mark II. The RSI Zeus, we're expecting it in like 324/4.0 in Pyro. The Polaris, they said, was going to be in IAE, so the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo, later this year, like November timeframe. It would not surprise me if the RSI Polaris was actually a CitizenCon surprise. Like, hey, as of CitizenCon or the end of CitizenCon, those with the Polaris get to fly it. But we'll get the Zeus Mark II very quickly. Again, in the next month or so. The rest of this, again, I don't want to go through reading the entire narrative. We're already almost an hour into the show, and I just want to make sure we have plenty of time to cover everything else. But read it. Again, nothing really earth-shattering. I would cover it if I thought there was. All right, Inside Star Citizen. It's a good. I don't know. This was probably the weaker of the Inside Star Citizens up to this point this year, in my opinion. Weaker, not as an insult to the context. It's just nothing really new. Like, we know about server meshing. We know there's a static server meshing and a dynamic server meshing. We know that there was a test, I think to Evocati, but there was a test with server meshing that was done where, say, content creators, I'm sure there were others, but there were some that were able to kind of find that threshold between servers and kind of travel between those servers and see what it meant to like throw cargo boxes across. There's some fun stories and some discoveries that happened, but basically this is Jared Huckabee going through or narrating the path of server meshing up to this point and the test and the results of the test. Again, I don't want to diminish the teams that are involved. This was just a week ago, and I'm assuming at this point we've all seen it, we've all experienced it. So we're not going to watch it. It's good information. If you want to know what server meshing is, then please, by all means, watch it. By all means, watch it. Server meshing, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the meshing of servers, so it's a seamless transition between servers, and it's not a load screen or something that is game breaking or immersion breaking. That's it in a nutshell. Dynamic server meshing tied in with replication layer splitting and all the persistent entity, that whole pillar, or those pillars of technology together combined, is something that other games are not doing, can't do. Server meshing is not new. Other games are doing server meshing, so we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'm sure when Pyro comes out, we'll talk about it. All right, we are finally... It's 9:04 a.m. U.S. Central. We are finally in this week in Star Citizen. Happy Monday, everyone. All right, let's do this. Alpha 324 Evocati testing is underway, and we're making significant strides toward the highly anticipated cargo-themed patch. The team is working tirelessly and iterating on early feedback to ensure that the upcoming update is as robust as possible, and we hope to open up to more waves soon. Break. I was kind of hoping that the PTU Wave 1 would be today, but with the launch of the Foundation Festival, highly unlikely. Back to the article. Last week, Inside Star Citizen broke down our recent server meshing tests, covering the recent milestones and development. We also saw the return of the Jumptown Global event. You have until Wednesday. There you go. You have until Wednesday to test the waters and answer the age-old question, is Jumptown safe? And in case you missed it, we unveiled our collaboration with Monster Tech Sim on a special Star Citizen branded flight chairs series. Themed after RSI, Anvil, and Mirai, these chairs are available now. July is shaping up to be another happening month as we gear up for our Foundation Festival 2954, which commences this Friday, which while we're here, I'm going to reload. Nope, it's not ready yet. All right. Goodness. The event. This event is a celebration of the truly welcoming and inclusive nature of our community, where experienced players, enriched with knowledge and insights from their past adventures, are always ready to share their wisdom with newcomers. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out in the verse, Foundation Festival offers something for everyone. So get ready for the upcoming festivities. The bullet points. Tuesday was a lore post with the Whitley's Guide Aegis Vulcan. Wednesday, roadmap update and roundup, which were not comlink, like not on this website, but they are available in Spectrum. We'll go through that. And then we have the June Squadron 42 monthly report. We have the Inside Star Citizen. And then we have Star Citizen Live happening right after this podcast. So there you go. Specifically about the Star Citizen Live. So I think this was, I don't want to lie to you. Hold on. So let's go to general. I'll share my screen in just a second. Looking for questions, making mission 2. This was 11 days ago. Oh, was this the Star Citizen that was postponed? July 1st. One of these Star Citizens was postponed, and I don't know if it was last Friday, now that I think about it. I'm having this like epiphany on podcast, and it's always embarrassing, but if I'm not mistaken, last week's Star Citizen Live was pushed out to this one. Regardless, this is 11 days ago, so on July 1st, they pushed out a looking for questions, which is usually what they do in preparation for the Star Citizen Live Ask the Community, and this is making missions 11-2, but where Jort and Nick return to play the new cargo missions they created on last week's show. So last week's show, again, I think was 2 weeks ago. We're just going to drop it here. There is a Star Citizen Live happening right after the show. I'm pretty damn sure it is cargo missions. But at the same time, I also don't see anything about last week's episode on Spectrum. So, podcast failure. There you go. Let's just move on. All right, so let's talk about the Evocati notes. There's just, I feel like every other day there's a new patch note that comes out for Evocati and their PTU. And so what I do is I kind of ignore all of those. I report out on them during the week over on social media. But for the podcast, I take the latest and greatest. So what you're looking at here, this was yesterday's patch notes that dropped and what is currently live to the Evocati testers. So I think the change here, maybe the good news here or whatever, everything is being tested except for like balancing. So the hangars, the freight elevators, storage access, hangar decorations, the cargo hauling missions are now being tested, right? That was something that we've been watching on this podcast for the last several weeks. So everything that we were expecting out of 324 is being tested, with the exception of here's this rebalance, the cargo commodity rebalance, and then specifically the dynamic event blockade runner, which we'll watch the Inside Star Citizen to get more specifics on that. But that, again, makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that the last thing that you would test would be the dynamic event on a test or on an Evocati PTU test. So nothing else really is different. If you've been listening to previous episodes, it's the same kind of patch note after patch note after patch note, other than now everything's being tested. In this one specifically, they improved some gameplay, so the ASOP and elevator UI polish has executed. Then there was some atmospheric flight tuning that took place, a bunch of bug fixes, a couple of technical fixes. So again, good luck to the Evocati. Have fun. Yeah, I am not Evocati, and I don't think, even if I was Evocati, I don't think I would be a diligent tester, because the game already is kind of difficult to play, and so you're throwing us into a destroyed server to even test it more. I don't know. I think I'll default to like Cyberpunk or a game that has more structure for my own sanity. Okay, Wednesday, like I said, roadmap roundup happened. It threw me by surprise, because usually roadmap roundups are comlink drops. So a lot of times through the day I have the comlink up, I refresh it every 30 minutes to an hour, and that's how I get like the latest and greatest information, and I'm on top of it usually. Well, this escaped me. I didn't actually see this until Thursday. Thursday morning I was doing like Today in Star Citizen, my daily post that I throw out. And this was something I discovered. I was like, oh, crap. Well, on Wednesday, there was a roadmap roundup. Just it was hard to find. It was buried in Spectrum. So let me share it. For those of you on YouTube, my assumption is because there's nothing new. There's nothing new, so why drop a link about it? But Jake Acapella, or Jake Bradley, one of the community managers, posted this. Again, there's nothing new. And he even reiterates it, that there's nothing new. But let's just read through it real quick, and then we'll talk about it. So happy Wednesday, everyone. Every 2 weeks, we accompany the roadmap update with a brief explanatory note to give you insight into the decision-making that led to any changes. This is part of an effort to make our communications more transparent, more specific, and more insightful for all of you who help make Star Citizen and Squadron 42 possible. Well, we don't have a release view update today, which is probably why it's not on Comlink. It's a reminder. It means things are progressing as planned, displayed on the roadmap. We do want to address the lack of updates to the progress tracker. We're eager to update this view so you can see the extensive tasks our teams are working on. With the big push to release 4.0 and Squadron 42 reaching its feature complete milestone, our resources have had to shift around as new needs arise at an increased frequency than in the past. This created a significant challenge in maintaining the progress tracker. The team is working to push Squadron 42 toward the finish line while balancing this with ensuring Star Citizen receives new features, content, and updates. At this stage of development, especially with such a big focus on Squadron 42's polish, developers or even entire teams may need to shift focus quickly when necessary work presents itself. This dynamic approach is different from our usual internal flow and has required a bit more flexibility and nimble nature. Despite this, our production team has a plan to update the progress tracker very soon. Trademark. They are currently working on populating the roadmap to better represent our global workload, starting with content being worked on through the end of 2024 and then soon after into 2025. Once the update to Progress Tracker is ready, we'll mention it ahead of time in the This Week in Star Citizen schedule post preceding the publish. We sincerely appreciate your patience and understanding. It's an exciting time for both games, and we look forward to sharing more details with you soon. So there you go. Nothing new. Everything's on track. Look the other way. I don't mean that as derogatory as that might come out, but just why drop a comm link if all it's going to say is thumbs up, check the progress tracker, things are good, things are on track. So I can kind of see both sides of this story. If I would scroll down, I'm not sharing my screen anymore, but if I were to scroll down, there's mad individuals. They're mad that there's nothing new, or I'll leave it there. there's anger. So I can kind of understand maybe not having something fed to you on a weekly basis. It makes you feel like there's not progress, but the point of Jake's comments, or we'll say CIG's take on this, the point of it is that everything's on track. So check the progress tracker, and that's what you can expect. So I'll leave it there. I don't think there's anything worth diving into more. I love the roadmap roundup. It's a very succinct recap. We haven't had one in a little bit. Okay, great. That's why we look at patch notes. That's why we look at the Evo Kadi 324 notes, to get that kind of what's in the pipeline, what's coming in the next couple of weeks. And with that, we are now at 2 more articles before we check one last time in the comm link to see if the Foundation Festival drops. So we will be going to Inside Star Citizen. We'll watch it together, and this is huge. It's Cargo and Blockade Runner. This is huge for Soul Provision. It's huge if you're a fan of this podcast. I am all about the cargo loop. There is so much excitement in my world, whether it's again Soul Provision or social media. Cargo is where it's at, moving into Pyro. And even when Pyro launches, getting cargo and deliveries from Stanton to Pyro, Pyro to Stanton, that is going to be a lot of fun. In my humble opinion, bounty hunting can only go so far, whether it's 1v1 or whether it's a group versus another group. Bounty hunting is bounty hunting. I feel like it's the Call of Duty kind of dopamine hit that is arcade-ish, right? Just quick in, quick out, whatever. It's fun. Not complaining. It's fun. It's not until you throw in, and I'm speaking for myself, it's not until you throw in what we call the Soul Provision game loop that whole thing becomes immensely, infinitely more fun. So what we've done is we've taken bounty hunting, and we have a hunter kill team that goes and attacks the bounty, and we all partner up, so we're all getting credit, but they go and they kill the bounty. Then we have a C2 that follows behind them. They get out of their ships, the hunter kill team get out of their ships, and they help offload the cargo from the downed ships onto the C2. And then we have another team, the salvaging team, that comes in behind that with a reclaimer and salvages the ships. It's a great loop for 12, 15, 20 of us at a time. And that's actually how we moved into last night's Org Night, which we called like the Vaughn Org Night. So it's the Soul Provision game loop tied in with the Vaughn missions. So with Vaughn, you just have more valuable cargo. Same concept. You're going to pull the 45K, kind of the elite missions in the Vaughn chain. You're going to go and you're going to soft death all of those vehicles. So again, maybe it's the hunter kill team, maybe it's whatever you want to call it, but we have a hunter kill team go, we soft death those ships, and we have like 1 or 2 C2s that are there to offload the Weevil eggs. Right? We had Weevil eggs, we had maize, and last night we had millions and millions of UEC worth of Weevil eggs. A lot of fun. But it's when you throw, my opinion, it's when you throw in cargo and you start having this holistic, like full spectrum approach to a mission, is when this game truly shines. And so I think this is what this Inside Star Citizen is getting at. It's this next evolution of cargo missions. And so the article specifically itself says, join us for a discussion with the mission design team to gain some early intel about a new upcoming global event and explore the unique features of the cargo hauling missions coming in Alpha 324. So I'm going to continue sharing my screen. We're going to pull up the Inside Star Citizen. We're going to watch it together and react. Let's go.
The upcoming Alpha 324 has a variety of life in the verse changing aspects, including the personal persistent hangars, freight elevators, and the next step forward in physicalized inventory. But with these changes come a new era in cargo-specific mission content. Different than the commodity runs you might be used to, we spoke in depth about this in our recent Making Missions 2 episode of Star Citizen Live, which you should check out if you haven't already. Your Nick did great. And on this week's ISC, they're joined by Elliot and yet another Nick to show you these new cargo missions and reintroduce us to the long-mentioned Blockade Runner global event.
So how many of these do you think you've done at this point?
Videos for you, I don't know, over 20.
You still like doing them?
Yeah.
This is the third one, so I guess I've done 2 before this.
This will be my second.
What was your first one?
Also Blockade Runner.
This your first one?
Uh-huh.
You nervous?
Tiny bit.
They gotten easier or harder?
Easier. When I first started, I was focused too much on the camera, and that was making me think too much.
When there's a camera pointed at you, it's still a little bit different than just speaking to people, but...
I've tried to look at you or thought that the camera was someone. It made it easier because it felt like I was just talking to someone instead of looking at a machine trying to be perfect.
So you stopped trying to be perfect?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm just like, yeah, f*** it.
That should have been easy for you.
Until the current event, this sector has been resolved. Civilians are advised to avoid engaging in space travel.
Blockade Runner is an event that focuses on cargo hauling and space combat.
The inhabitants of a station ask for aid. The bad guys have blockaded one of these stations, and the citizens there need help to get certain supplies from outside to go back in.
The idea with it is that you would have someone who flies a cargo ship and loads up full of cargo, and then have a bunch of escort ships that help fight them. However, the way they now have to get the cargo means they have to actually go and extract it from pirates who have taken it from the station.
We wanted to make a cargo-based event because a lot of our current events are really heavy on combat. And cargo's been kind of underutilized on the global event scene, and we thought it would be fun to work that into our usual design.
The response we saw from Xenothreat, when we first put Xenothreat out, we really liked when we saw players working together in kind of like a Dunkirk type moment where one person had pulled up, just opened the ramp, a couple of people had cleared the wreck already, and then they're all just throwing cargo into the back of someone's ship. They don't know this person, they've not talked to them, but everyone understands their role in this space they've created. And there's people who are flying above, sort of also protecting against the waves of Ninetales that were coming to the wreck. And it was just this beautiful mix of people who just all kind of knew exactly what role they fit into and asked no questions and just got the job done. We wanted to recreate that feeling in its own event. So the flow of Blockade Runner is when you start the mission, you will receive marker points of potential sites where a pirate could be that has stolen cargo from the station that's requesting its return.
A hostile enemy force has attacked one of the LEOs throughout Stanton, and they've stolen a great deal of Zeta Prolonide from it. This Zeta Prolonide's been shipped out, it's being carried away, and the remainder of the enemy force has stayed behind, surrounding the LEO in a blockade. It's up to players of the verse to chase down these enemy ships that contain the stolen material, defeat them in combat, reclaim the material.
Either via the use of distortion weapons to make sure you get every piece of cargo that's on board the ship, or via killing it and maybe getting less, but you run less of the risk of dying yourself.
Once they do recover the stolen material from the ships scattered throughout space, they'll have to make their way past the blockade and return it to the LEO.
There will be ships flying around that you have to actually disable while trying to land, or else you could lose all of your cargo.
Either way, their goal is to land safely at the LEO with the stolen material on. And once they have that, they get to use our fancy new cargo elevator mechanic to return the stolen cargo to the station.
The reward for Blockade is based off of participation. There will be, similar to Xenothreat, there'll be a bar that fills up with contribution, and every time that bar kind of ticks over, you'll get a payment, and then you'll get a big chunk at the end when all of the SEU amount of cargo has been retrieved back to the station. So to get all of the cargo, I'd recommend using distortion weapons and boarding the ship. This way you can ensure that you get everything out of the cargo hold. Whereas if you do it the other way, you know, you go from this 100% sort of loot to maybe 30%. There's going to be a big difference to encourage a different type of gameplay that players aren't really used to playing in our game.
I think a lot of the game loops in our game are a bit drawn out, and I like to think that you can get into the action pretty quick with this, and it's a relatively tight game loop, all things considering. I hope people will be able to jump in and out of it as they see fit and have a good time.
In addition to Blockade Runner, we're also...
Yeah, so, you know, I didn't pause that at all in that first section, the first 5 minutes and 30 seconds. They do a really good job kind of explaining, obviously, it's their product, it's their baby. But they do a really good job explaining everything. Everything I could relate it to, they already did. This is Xenothreat. This is what we loved about the later stages of Xenothreat. Again, a holistic, maybe full spectrum slice of what Star Citizen is, utilizing the new freight elevators. I really love the concept here. And I will relate to what Elliot was talking about people just kind of knowing their roles, kind of rolling up on a downed ship. I'm talking Xenothreat, the last phase of Xenothreat, but rolling up on a downed ship and just kind of showing up with your pyro multi-tool already, you know, unholstered. It's very obvious you're there to help out. And it was, you know, you just picked up items and you were putting it on whatever, like MSR or C1, C2, whatever was available at that time. And it was easy for you to just jump in and out as a solo player. But I also, like, what I think maybe they missed an opportunity talking about was maybe the org impact. Right? They did mention you'd probably have like a cargo ship accompanied by an escort. I mean, let's lean into that a little bit more. What does it mean for 12 to 20 individuals in an org to get together? You know, do you show up in a Hammerhead fully staffed, or is it better to have multiple onesie twosie, you know, ships? That's something that we debate all the time in Soul Provision is, you know, do we have these massive like Hammerheads when the Idris comes out, when the Polaris comes out, do we fully staff those and have one target for the enemy to be attacking, or is it better to have multiple Scorpiuses, but multiple two-seaters? Hurricanes, that's a two-seater. It's this ongoing debate. So like last night's org night, we just had a bunch of onesie twosies, and it was fun. We had 6, 7, 8, you know, ships on our side, you know, flying around and doing this Vaughn mission set. And I feel like that's better because it distracts the enemy. It takes the enemy away. But like, this is something that your org is going to have to decide between, you know. But I love the idea of like having to go and board a pirate ship. This is basically the Soul Provision loop, but having to board a pirate ship and steal that cargo back. You're going to need to think about your equipment. You're going to want the pyro either two-hander, the two-hander, or the Grey Cat one-hander. You're going to have to think about that. You're going to have to think about your getup and what do you come equipped with. It's exciting. Maybe you have an assault team and a fire team Alpha, fire team Bravo. The fire team Alpha is out there helping you with the obtaining the gear or the cargo from the pirate ships, while you have fire team Bravo already clearing the site, the orbital station, right? Already clearing that, so that way it's an easy transition for your C1 or C2 to go from point A to point B. I can see this being a multiple front operation. So anyways, Blockade Runner is exciting, super excited about it, but it's not really, for me, it's not the highlight of Inside Star Citizen. What you're about to listen, what you're about to see is the highlight for Inside Star Citizen. It's all things cargo missions in the future of what we're doing on a larger scale. So here we go.
So adding a bunch of hauling missions that also utilize the freight elevator and instance hangars we're going to get.
With the introduction of freight elevators, we can now make missions that we were never able to make before.
Up until now, we haven't really had any missions which allow you to use your cargo grid. You won't have to go to various different parts of a station or find a ground station to get your land vehicle. You'll be able to get everything you need for your trip organized in one place.
Now, I can just go to my hangar and there's an ASOP terminal in there and I can watch my ship go down and come up and I can have all my boxes out.
So huge.
The ability it gives me to build the missions that I love is insane.
Yep.
So for me as an economy designer, freight elevators means that I can reward players for new game loops and different types of activity that they haven't been able to fully play before, such as loading and unloading your cargo, figuring out logistics, and actually allowing players to monetize that effort and get a suitable reward for it. So the more time and effort that it takes to use the freight elevators and do the hauling missions effectively, the more opportunities I have as an economy designer to find the appropriate rewards for players for that game loop. And I don't want to see any Reddit threads on the rewards for these missions, because at the time of filming, we're still weeks away.
That means the numbers you see in this episode aren't the real numbers. Don't go to Reddit. Give this guy a break. They'll be real by the time the thing comes out.
You might be thinking, well, we've been moving boxes for a few years now. Those delivery missions already exist. What makes cargo hauling missions so special? Well, in cargo hauling missions, we're actually allowing you to move real commodity containers with real value through the verse. You're not stuck with one SCU box.
Real quick, so that user interface we were just looking at, for those of you on podcast, let's see if I can find it without screwing this up. So on the delivery missions, so usually you hit F1, you go into your verified missions. There's a category called delivery. These are in a category called hauling, Hauling, hauling. So just, I wanted to share that. It's easy to see on YouTube, but if you're listening on a podcast, that's how you will obtain or start these missions.
Now, those delivery missions already exist. What makes cargo hauling missions so special? Well, in cargo hauling missions, we're actually allowing you to move real commodity containers with real value through the verse. You're not stuck with one SCU boxes. If you're asked to move 400 SCU, those will actually be intelligently packed by the system into different container sizes, which means you'll be able to load them up on your cargo grids for your cargo ships the way you've always wanted to organize them.
These missions will handle high volume of cargo. These missions are built for people who are going to own a Caterpillar, people who are going to own a Hull C. These are mimicking a logistical framework that's going to be needed in, a system, a universe this big to transport the goods to and from different locations.
Let me give you some examples. You find a mission where a few different outposts on the surface of Hurston have mined some iron, and you've got to bring it up to Lorville, where then it can be transported further from there. So you go to each of these outposts, you land at that location, and there, in the warehouse of that outpost, those containers will be waiting for you where you can call it up through the freight elevator. You load it up into your ship, and then you figure out what the next location is, and the next location, and the next location. All
right, here we go. That freight elevator, let me pause it whenever we get there.
Go to each of these outposts.
Well, I can pause it right here. So the mining facility that they're sharing, and again, this is for those of you on podcast, the mining facility that they're sharing, you have the landing pad, but you've got now, on those landing pads, you now have freight elevators. So it looks like there's a freight elevator at the 12 o'clock, maybe the 5 o'clock, and the 9 o'clock. And so, again, imagine all the images that you've seen of your freight elevators. Now they are physically at the mining facilities on planet side. So you would usually go from the landing pad that I'm pointing at with my mouse. You'd go from the landing pad, kind of walk down the landing pad and go to the building that has the orange tower. And that orange tower building is where usually the supply, either the boxes are or the kiosks to turn in the boxes. This is all happening at the landing pad now. So just to clear that up and kind of illustrate, they don't talk about it, they're just showing it. And so I just wanted to highlight that.
You land at that location, and there, in the warehouse of that outpost, those containers will be waiting for you where you can call it up through the freight elevator. You load it up into your ship, and then you figure out what the next location is, and the next location, and the next location. And you can basically do those in any order you like.
You'll have single pickup, single drop-off, so this could be picking up from the LEOs around ArtCorp, the Lagrange points, for example, and taking it to Area 18 or to Beijing Point, the station above. Then you'll have a multi-pickup and a singular drop-off. And then the opposite of that, which is singular pickup to multi-drop-off, could be the complete opposite, where you go from a Hurston DC to 2 other outposts delivering goods. It also lets us do a first static setup of what is being called StarSim, where we can test out the flow and then actually make the dynamic side of it work, where we can balance it based off of the needs and wants of the actual locations.
The work that I was involved with missions with Yorit was to use the EVR algorithm that I created to make sure that all of the effort that you put in has a commensurate reward.
EVR, and I think he's literally about to say this, but EVR is effort versus reward. It's basically how much you should get in return for the time and energy it takes to do the mission.
EVR stands for effort versus reward. The EVR algorithm is a general balancing algorithm we've developed that takes into account the time and the difficulty of what you're doing, and it gives you a reward that is appropriate for that. So if you do something that takes a long time but isn't very difficult, or if you do something that takes a short time but is very difficult, you're going to get appropriately rewarded. So obviously, this kind of thing, effort and reward, isn't a new concept. It's been around since the beginning of computer games. But as the economy team moves forwards and we work on all of the exciting new features that are coming out, we're really happy to be able to bring this kind of coherent approach to the entire game economy.
In the end, cargo hauling missions aren't about how good you are at shooting the bad guys. It's about figuring out which hauls the universe needs. And ultimately, it's about having fun delivering some boxes. Thanks for watching, everybody.
So what did we learn this week? Well, hopefully that the cargo missions aim to provide a more involved and deliberate experience than the commodity ones you might be used to. That the blockade runner will benefit from boarding tactics more than simply just blowing things up. And that while your everyday life in the verse certainly changes in Alpha 324, it will continue to evolve in the subsequent 4.0 and beyond. And if you'd like to learn even more about these cargo missions, you can tune in to tomorrow's Star Citizen Live, where the team will talk even more about the stuff you saw here. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. Thanks for letting us share the people and process of game development with you. And we'll see you all here next week.
Love it. So that excites me. I think a little dose of bounty hunting, mercenary missions. So first off, I put merc missions ahead of bounty hunting. Like, I love flying. Maybe you're blowing up a turret, but you land and have to physically go into the bunker. Merc missions are where it's at right now for me. I digress. I think a little bit of combat, aerial combat, a little bit of FPS, all that is great. But for me, and at least my org and my circle of social networking, this is it. Being a space trucker or moving cargo, it gives you that purpose. It gives you that legitimate purpose to be in a place, right? Are we on Stanton? Are we on Microtech? And why? Why are we going from system to system? It's very easy to just stay in Crusader. Just stay there, and that's all you do in 323. You stay in Crusader. And then maybe the next patch comes out and you stay in Microtech. But there's something about cargo hauling, that deliberate, the Hurston DC distribution center, taking you from there to New Babbage, down to, Crusader, ArtCorp, like, having a reason to go around staying. And then when Pyro comes out, having a reason to go to Pyro and all of the implications with that, right? The lawlessness of Pyro and the piracy and that whole conversation. You're going to want to up your security even more when doing those missions. This is the exciting part of Star Citizen for me, in my opinion. All right, one more check on Foundation Festival. I'm refreshing. No update, and it's 9:40 a.m. U.S. Central. So we are going to go through the Whitley's Guide, the Vulcan. We're going to take our time and read it. It's lore, and we love our lore. So we're going to read it, and then we will check one last time for the Foundation Festival. What we'll do is I'll stop the recording. I'll wait until the Foundation Festival releases, and then I'll tack on that to the very end, like in a separate segment for the podcast. So, anywho, let's get into the Whitley's Guide Vulcan. The Aegis Dynamics Vulcan. Initial development. Like many Aegis Dynamics spacecraft, the Vulcan support ship has a long and storied history that stretches back several centuries to the height of the Messer era. In 2590, innovations in fuel refinement allowed ships to spend longer on the drift, so the UEEN requested proposals for a medium-sized support spacecraft with the flexibility to conduct both refueling and rearming operations. Given the military contracting process at the time, it was a foregone conclusion that Aegis would be awarded the project. Nevertheless, the Vulcan team opted to go beyond the military specification and develop what they referred to as a true 3R spacecraft, one capable of rearming, refueling, and repairing. Aegis designers reasoned that if they could deliver a ship capable of supporting smaller fighters and bombers, rapidly becoming a more important aspect of naval doctrine, they would have a chance at building something instrumental to the UEEN's arsenal longer term. Early prototypes would be completely different spacecraft compared to the models released 3.5 centuries later. Early Vulcans lacked the Bard drones of the modern version, meaning that each of the 3 main processes had to be accomplished manually in a considerably more dangerous way. After a series of early accidents destroyed several Vulcans, engineers developed a process by which munitions were kept inert and then activated by remote once loaded. Early refueling using the Vulcan platform was a more difficult proposition. Spacecraft were required to maneuver extremely close and connect via external probe for the duration of fueling. Unlike with munitions, there was no option to make quantum fuel inert. Crews were keenly aware of the increased danger during refueling. Unlike with munitions, there was no option to make... Ooh, I already read that. However, this was not... No, I was right. Unlike with munitions, there was no option to make quantum fuel inert. Crews were keenly aware of the increased danger during refueling. In ideal situations, refueling was done at a full stop. However, this was often not possible under combat operations, earning Vulcan crews the genuine respect of fighter and bomber squads. However, repair was a comparatively simple process, with the ship's rear compartment allowing the storage of repair tools and supplies that could be easily accessed by crewmen in external maneuvering suits. As was common of support spacecraft at the time, the early Vulcans were completely unarmed and featured limited armor. As advances in processes and military strategy improved over the decades, the Vulcans' defensive capabilities would be reworked significantly. The resulting ship, formally launched in 2594, impressed the UEEN on its formal review, prompting them to order nearly 4 times the number stated in the original proposal. As the ship found its place in active service, Aegis prioritized future development to keep it from becoming obsolete. Changes to the Vulcan platform happened rapidly as the company adapted to battlefield reports and worked to integrate the latest technology. Within a decade, the simple but dangerous workshop concept for repair operations had been replaced with a formalized process using manipulator arms, while training for in-flight refueling had improved and significantly reduced casualties. Changes to all three of the Vulcan's processes would occur regularly, supported by Aegis at every turn. The modern Vulcan took shape in 2895 with the adoption of Saga data systems, bar drones that standardized the ship's support functions and significantly reduced danger. By using the soon-to-be industry-standard drones instead of developing their own, the overall cost per unit of the Vulcan was reduced, and Aegis entered into a strategically important relationship with an up-and-coming technology company. The Vulcan at war. The Vulcan was first bloodied in 2603 during the early battles of the Second Tavaran War. By the start of the conflict, the spacecraft had been part of the UEEN inventory for almost 10 years. There it had proven its worth in peacetime, supporting and expanding the range of convoys and patrols. Its first combat missions, however, did not go well. Tavaran forces quickly realized that they could reduce UEE effectiveness by targeting the slow and underdefended support ships. For the first 6 months of the war, Vulcan losses were significantly heavier than anticipated, and a number of strike missions failed when returning bombers were unable to refuel and were destroyed by Tavaran fighters. These problems were solved by both manufacturing and doctrinal changes. Aegis developed a battlefield upgrade for early Vulcans that improved armor and added a defensive turret, changes that would speak to the eventual rework of the ship. The military itself adapted the ship's role by operating Vulcans in groups of 3, one for repair, one for rearming, and one for refueling. These trios were then assigned escort fighters, defending the ships when they came under attack and using their services in downtime. The Vulcans saw no such problems when first pitted against the Vandal. In early battles, the Vandal seemed to have limited interest in targeting support ships at all, instead focusing on engaging fighters and taking others as scrapper prizes. Continued advances to the platform allowed the ships that first battled the Vandal to be much more effective, both at their core roles and in defending themselves. With drones improving the 3Rs, Vulcans were pressed into service in greater numbers than even before, both in their traditional roles and as fleet support, with multiple Vulcans often assigned to closely follow destroyers and cruiser squadrons. In recent years, the UEEN has taken to deploying what they refer to as ranged strike groups in an attempt to relieve pressure from the Vandal. These strike groups consist of base-launched fighters and bombers supported by modern Vulcans to significantly extend their range and striking power, allowing them to deploy into enemy-held territory to conduct raids. The strategy was developed around the idea of responding in kind to Vandal anti-commerce raids and seems to be proving effective. The Vulcan at peace. The Vulcan expanded beyond its original military role quickly due to the simplicity of the original design. Without military-grade weapons or advanced technologies like drones, the UEE saw little reason in preventing the sale of the design to corporate and private users. This gave the Vulcan its second life as a civilian support ship. Initial marketing was aimed at large corporations operating their own convoys that required support ships to operate safely. Aegis sold civilianized Vulcans in great numbers, and within 5 years, the design was a staple of well-trodden trade routes. What Aegis could not have predicted was the ship's ensuing popularity with so-called wayfarers. Initially started as an alliance between 3 hobbyist fighting clubs in the late 29th century, wayfarer groups have become a kind of all-for-one do-gooders, organizations supporting independent spacecraft owners. The Vulcan provided exactly what they had been lacking, a uniform flagship capable of providing the kind of assistance they had previously been dodging or doggedly adapting civilian spacecraft to offer. Today, you can find these versatile and durable ships in most systems, whether they're attached to companies, orgs, or as independent service providers. And there you go. The lore and the history of the Aegis Vulcan. I actually currently don't have one in my hangar. Don't have one pre-ordered or pledged for. But it is a great concept. I think the Starfarer is a refueler, but if I'm not mistaken, the Starfarer does not do the other two R's. So, might be something to look into. I'm talking to myself. The next IAE, I might be looking at the Vulcan just to see if it's something I want to add to the hangar. So at this current moment, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the podcast. Again, I'll probably pause, wait for the Foundation Festival to come out, and then I will add kind of a conclusion with the Foundation Festival. If it waits too long, I'll just publish the podcast and call the next episode Foundation Festival 2. Cross that bridge whenever I get there. So I hope this finds everybody well. If you want to become part of the conversation, you can join our social medias. It's all websites at /BTV_cast. Over on YouTube, we video the podcast and we share it in that form. And that's /@BTV_cast. At the end of every episode over on Spotify, we ask a poll and a Q&A for you to be engaged and have a conversation with us. And you can do so again over on Spotify. I ask polls all the time in Twitter, so if you don't get that poll on Spotify, feel free to follow us on Twitter to engage there as well. And last, you can email us at contact@beyondtheversehq.com. Questions, comments, concerns, anything, and we will cover it on the next episode. You join our in-game organization called Soul Provision at www.robertspaceindustriescom/orgs/provision. Again, I hope this finds you well. I hope you had a great holiday. If you are in the United States and you had Independence Day, hope you had a great one. Safe travels as you traverse beyond the verse. Take care, everybody.